to One Drink With. Today's guest is a Diageo national champion. He's been in many bartending competitions. And I first met this gentleman at the Cayman Islands when Flair was running a bartending competition. And we affectionately call this guy the Rookie. Ladies and gentlemen, this is One Drink With Chris Cardone. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Cardone. How's that? How'd you like that trailer, sir?
I got to tell you, I feel like I stand a little bit taller right now. Maybe an inch taller after that now. I feel good. Thank you.
I don't show anyone the trailers until this episode of One Drink With Chris Cardone. So one of my jobs every week is to create a trailer. I took the video. The video is just from Esquire. But I put my own music on it, and then put everywhere you've been, like every TV show you've been on, CBS, NBC, ABC, Travel Channel. You've been all over the place in many, many competitions, man. Wow, what a full resume.
Yeah, it's obviously as you know, when you do this for so long, you get a lot of opportunities that you get to take advantage of. But I think the trick is being flexible and not kind of putting yourself in one box. So I think, from going, as you said, like we met in 2000, right, in the Cayman Islands,
right.
2001, whatever, 2001.
I can't remember.
Yeah, and to go from that to the whole cocktail thing, and then to go from to not just be a Flair guy, and to not just be a mixology guy, and to not just be a club bartender, to be able to do everything and kind of use all the skills in the toolbox, I think is the reason that I've been able to celebrate so many, cool opportunities and exciting moments in the business.
Right. You were on with Neil Patrick Harris on his show, and you've had all kinds of great celebrity moments. Let's get a drink going so that we can get our conversation going, because we need to have one drink with Chris Cardone. And I have asked Chris to do a dry drink because it's dry January. So we're going to celebrate dry January with Chris Cardone.
All right, so we're going to start. Obviously, you're going to take our tin, right? We're going to do 1.25 ounces of lemon juice.
1.25 ounces.
And then 1.25 ounces of blood orange honey syrup.
And tell us again how you wanted us to make this blood orange honey syrup.
So with the honey syrup, all I did was just substitute basically sugar for honey, and then blood orange juice for water. So if you make a normal simple syrup with sugar and water, just take those two out, blood orange juice and honey, equal parts, put them on the stove, heat them up till they become one coagulated liquid.
Right.
Take it off the stove, you're done. Easy peasy.
Excellent. That's exactly what I did here. I just wanted to hear you say it. Good stuff.
And I'm going to take my Pellegrino soda. I'm going to pour that into my coupe, maybe about 2 ounces, give or take. And I think this is a big thing that a lot of people make a mistake about. They end up shaking the drink with the soda inside, and then you get a flat drink. And everyone knows there's nothing worse than having some sort of flat cocktail that's supposed to have bubbles.
The soda in the glass first.
Yeah.
Not floating soda on top.
No. So the reason is that by shaking now and straining it on top of the cocktail, it'll allow everything to mix up. If you put it on top, you get nothing but the Pellegrino soda when you take your first sip, because there's nothing to stir in a coupe.
That's really funny. Really funny.
So we'll add some ice to our tin. Let's put this guy up. Easy peasy. Good stuff. So as you're up, I think one of the big things I learned from studying some other bartenders on mocktails and non-alcoholic drinks is one of the biggest problems is the bartenders don't account for the lack of alcohol. So by adding more citrus and more syrup than you normally would in a regular cocktail, but still keeping them at either an equal ratio or maybe slightly higher on the syrup, it actually ends up making a more balanced mocktail. So I would never do an ounce and a quarter or an ounce and a half of citrus or syrup in a normal cocktail. But by doing it this way in the mocktail, keep that kind of like body and life to the mocktail. And then Pellegrino for me has a little bit of residual sugar to it. Right. So that's why I kept it kind of even instead of doing maybe more syrup. A lot of bartenders will say with your mocktails to up the syrup a little higher than the citrus, but because of the Pellegrino, it adds so much flavor, but it also adds a lot of sugar. So I kind of kept them at an equal ratio.
Right. I'm struggling to create a sophisticated looking and sophisticated tasting non-alcoholic beverages. So those are some great points.
Cheers.
To you. That's delicious.
And it's simple, you know. I think another problem that a lot of people do is they end up trying to overthink a mocktail and putting 5, 6, 7, 8 ingredients in there.
Right.
You don't need to, you know. It's the whole idea is you want some acid, you want some body, and you want some bubbles. And if you can hit all 3 of those marks, it makes a really nice mocktail. It doesn't have to be something crazy. Someone who hasn't drank in 5.5 years, I don't need you to recreate the wheel when I go out. I just want to have something in my hand that tastes good, that's not overly sweet, not kind of boring and flat, and not something that's really, really, bright and citrusy to the point where I can't drink it. So, like, super simple cocktail that I can just sit back and relax and have the experience of drinking without having alcohol in it.
Right. And it's not just a lemonade or iced tea or something or a cola.
Exactly.
Yeah. When we go out and I like to have I like the experience of drinking beer.
Mm-hmm.
So I order a big glass, whatever the biggest glass they've got, and I get to fill it with soda water, no ice, and margarita mix in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I have the citrus flavors, and I still have the bubbles, and I can still, gulp it like you like to gulp beer,
Sure, yeah.
So that's my cheat for non-alc when I'm out and having a beer or something. So
and there are some non-alcoholic beers that are actually really tasty to the point where you can trick yourself almost. So for me, every once in a while, I still have that craving for a beer with a burger when I go out to a restaurant. Yeah. So like, for example, Clausthaler NA is it with the amber one. I could probably blind people on that, and half of them would tell me it's regular beer. It's just, it doesn't taste any different, at least not to me.
I'll have to try that. Yeah. I like adding a little sweet and sour. Even a little bit of this into one of your beers would bring out the citrus notes in it and just give it a little bit more body than the non-alcs have. So
sure.
Good stuff. All right. So you got 20 years bartending. How many years had you been bartending when you showed up at the Flair bartending competition in the Cayman Islands?
Less than 1, maybe 9 months.
Because you were taking had you just graduated a bartending school at the time?
Yeah, I went to bartending school in between semesters for college. I was in college in Pennsylvania, and I was home for the summer. And so I went to bartending school in June because I wanted to make extra money. That was my whole. I never thought I would do this for 20 years. I just thought I was going to make some extra money in college. So I went to bartending school, and then I went the following. Oh no, I guess it was exactly a year because we went in July. So it was 1 year later that I ended up going to the Caymans, and I just bartended through college. And I went back between my junior and senior year, and I was teaching, doing more helping out for the bartending school that I had learned from. And then I read online that there was the FBA, and I learned about that. And then I saw that there was a competition, and I had at the time I was 21, and I never had left the country, so I was really excited for the opportunity to see a different country. And I mean, Cayman Islands, and it was. I don't know if you remember this. It was like dirt cheap. It was like $350 total, including flight, hotel, everything. I was like, sold.
Yeah. It was such a great time. We did it 2 years in a row, and so much fun. We had the whole Flairco gang there. I think Scott Young was there with Extreme Bartending, and
Yep.
such a crazy. I mean, we were doing this, and we didn't realize the impact we were creating around the world. What was going to happen? And then, of course, Flair bartending took off and became this thing. You became the south or northeastern rep for the Flair Bartenders Association.
Yeah, I think that was just the way for Jim to shut me up. I do. I think he was just trying to get me to he's like, all right, well, just be the Northeast rep, that kind of thing.
Well, you came into Cayman Islands, and you're like, I'm here to win this thing.
Yeah. I had no idea what I was walking into,
Nothing.
And then I watched the guys start competing before I went, and I was like, oh, I'm in trouble.
Well, you didn't let on that you thought you were in trouble. You just barreled right on through.
Well, I think what was so cool about it, and I think it's and again, not to sound like the old man in the room clearly, but I think that the part for me that pulled me into the Flair world was the camaraderie aspect of it. You don't expect 25 guys who are competing against each other to be so friendly with each other, to share moves, to share tricks, to teach each other. And it was so fraternal in that aspect that I was hooked immediately. I was like, oh my God, I want to go to every comp. These guys are so this is such a great group of people. And that's what really hooked me in. And I think there's a little bit of that missing nowadays. We still there's people I can immediately think of in the world of bartending that are really true mentors who teach and take their time to really do teaching and teach from the start and the basics and arrogance with attitude. But I think that there's far and few these days, because I think everybody's so busy pumping up their own chest, talking about their own accolades, trying to make themselves a star. And there's so few people who are willing to take a back seat and really do the training and the education without the spotlight. And I think that's something that I saw that in the Cayman Islands when there was so many bartenders that weren't, they weren't puffing their chest out. They were just genuine bartenders who were excited about Flair, and they wanted to teach and work with other people doing it.
Great. Let me ask you then, because you've been involved in mixology competitions, is the camaraderie in mixology competitions not similar or the same, or how is it so different?
No, I mean it's similar. It's similar for sure. But I think that there's a little bit less of a, let's say, a teaching aspect. I think it's a little bit more about helping each other. When I was competing in world class, and when I started judging in world class, I've always seen all the bartenders, again, they'll work together in that they'll help each other set up. They'll help each other bring things to the room. So it's not like a dog eat dog kind of thing by any means, and the people that I competed with, a lot of them I still consider very close friends. I might not see them every day. I mean, nowadays I don't see anybody anymore, but I don't see them, but I know I could call them and we would jump right into a long conversation. And again, they feel like brothers and sisters to me, but I don't think there's that same level of hey, I saw this. Let me show you what you're doing wrong, or let me show you this new move I came up with. The bartenders in the cocktail world don't tend to do that the same, at least in my experience, where they're like, hey, let me show you this new thing I came up with, or this new technique, or, it's more about a little bit more pulled back in reserve.
Yeah, I think when I'm in a mixology competition and I see an opportunity where I would make the drink a little different myself, I think I would be shy to go up to another bartender and say, oh, you know what if you squeezed it this way? Assuming that they already knew that and are choosing to do it their way for whatever their decision is. So I think I myself would even be, whereas if I saw somebody flaring and flipping some bottles around and just couldn't do it, couldn't get the grip right or whatever, I would easily walk over and help with that. So,
sure, I think that's part of the sports aspect of Flair, right? There's a little bit more of that aspect of where you would kind of instruct or help somebody with a technique versus a cocktail, or like you said, squeezing something or shaking something or stirring something. There's this sort of, I'm trying to think of the word. It's not an arrogance. That's not the word I'm thinking of. But there's sort of a lack of, let's say, ingenuity that I see where people read, let's say, one of the more famous bartenders who has a book out there, right? Let's say they read their technique on how to do something. It's instantly that's the way to do it. There's no there's not so much of a, well, let me try it this way, let me try it that way, let me try it that way. And I see that when I judge world class, where I'll say to a bartender, like, why did you choose to do this, or why did you choose to do that? And a lot of times they don't really have the answer for why they did it, as much as who showed them or taught them or that kind of thing. There's a lot less of that sort of maybe questioning of, is this really the best way to do it? And I think that there's just a lot of that kind of monkey see, monkey do attitude. And that could be in Flair too. But I think that there's a little bit lacking right now in the world of people sort of challenging the status quo. And I mean, COVID's a great example of where bartenders started becoming really ingenious again with coming up with ways to deal with this in all sorts of ways.
Right, with the takeout and everything else. Yeah, and I think with the creativity of a mixology competition, it's about the flavors and the final look of the drink. Whereas the creativity of Flair is the techniques and how all the different things come together. So, bartenders have been making drinks for a couple hundred years, and we've only been flipping them for 20 or so, right? Depends on what school of thought. Maybe that goes back 100 years as well.
Right.
Going from Flair bartender into mixologist. How was that for you, and how warm was the water with the other mixologists when you walked in as, hey, I'm Flair guy, because by then you had a great reputation.
Yes. So I lucked out in the fact that I was early in the transition before the cocktail boom really truly happened. So, I mean, I remember we were all in New York for the Big Apple Showdown, that Flair comp that we were co-running, judging, whatever. And afterwards, we'd go over to see Sasha at Milk and Honey. And I remember that was the first time I had ever walked into a cocktail bar. And I remember that being like blown away. And this was probably 05. And I just couldn't believe it. I was like, it was a whole different bar world that I had ever seen anything like that. Between the music, the candlelight, not having a menu, just asking me what I like and then recommending me a cocktail, hearing big ice cubes being rattled in a shaker, like the correct way of shaking, straining correctly, like everything that you didn't see in the normal bar world. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I used a cheater tin to strain out shots on a bar when I was working with the cocktail thing, and it never even occurred to me to use a tea strainer to fine strain things, and like all those techniques. I remember just being blown away by it. But I think that because it was so early and I was very kind of hush about being a Flair guy when I was around that group, I just kind of kept it like almost on the DL. I didn't really want to I wasn't trying to brag about it or anything like that. I think it was just kind of an easier transition. And, I owe a lot for me in New York and my success as far as the mixology world and what I was able to learn and who I was able to learn from by Tobin Ellis, who I had reached out to him to kind of get me in the door with Julie Reiner when she was opening up her new spot, Lani Kai, which was a tiki cocktail bar in Soho. And it was brand new. And I kind of asked him if he would give me like a small introduction into, just to be able to meet her, and I would do the rest of the work. And he did just that. And I got in the door with an opportunity to talk to her about an interview. And then from that, I got a couple of nights. That from there, she recommended me over to Monkey Bar. And then from Monkey Bar, Graydon Carter was opening up the Beatrice Inn, and they needed a head bartender. And so without that introduction from Tobin, without meeting Julie, I don't know if I would have had the success that I've been lucky enough to have. I think I find when I talk to bartenders, we're all obviously social animals, and we like to sit at bars and talk and kind of, shoot the, what. I think that we all find as a common denominator is that bartenders fall into two categories, and that's bartenders who have been bartending before the cocktail thing exploded and after the cocktail thing exploded. Right. And there's a very, very, very fine line between the two styles. I think the aspect of customer service before the cocktail thing happened is a very different aspect of bartending. You don't see that training, that kind of thought.
So in the mixologist today, you don't see the same level of customer service. You're saying?
I see a different kind. You see a lot of a cocktail focused service. Everybody obviously hashtag hospitality left and right and all that kind of stuff. But it's so about the cocktail, or the fact that my bar is the number one bar in the world because Instagram told me so, or because this, my friend voted for me on this competition and stuff like that. There's such a lack of, it's not hospitality, it's work. It's bartending, it's the art, it's the aspect of paying attention to a guest and truly understanding what that guest needs. Right. So if I'm at a bar and I'm on a first date, I don't want to hear about your bitters. I don't want to hear about the story of rum with my daiquiri. I want you to leave me alone, right, so I can talk to my date. And on the other hand,
to talk about, right?
Anything.
Yeah. Everything that we're doing right now is about giving you a magic trick or something that you can entertain that couple with to give them something to talk about and then leave them alone.
Right.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the art of tending to the bar as opposed to being the bartender, but tending to the bar. So carry on with that point. That was I just wanted to throw that in.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, it's about listening, and it's about picking up on guest cues. And you can tell, if you really pay attention, you can tell by body language if somebody wants you to be talking to them or not at the bar. As soon as they pull back and fold their arms and start yesing you, that means go away. And I think that a lot of bartenders, they are so excited about being hospitable that it kind of becomes the exact opposite of that. It's not giving the guests what they want. You're telling me the 42-minute story about how this bar opened up. Maybe I don't want to hear the 42-minute story about how the bar opened up. Maybe I just want to have a quiet drink by myself or with somebody. Or maybe I do want to hear about the bar. And it's understanding that that person is a completely different person from the person next to them who doesn't. So it's about reading guest cues and understanding when somebody needs a drink, when they don't need a drink. It's all those things. Like I said, it's all those things you learned before the cocktail thing. Like, as silly as it is, cleaning ashtrays. I started tending bar before the worldwide smoking ban in bars happened. And that was a big part of bartending, was keeping all your ashtrays empty. But that was also an opportunity to engage your guest when dumping out that ashtray. And so there were so many more opportunities for that, to understand people, to remember people's names, to know their drink by heart. I always go back to this one bartender that worked at a bar I worked at. His name was Terry. He was probably, never asked him, but I would guess he would probably be in his late 60s, maybe early 70s. And he was bartending just on Saturday afternoons. He was retired. It was just, a gig to keep him busy and, to kind of make a couple bucks, I'm sure, but more or less probably get him out of the house and have some fun. And I'd never forget how good Terry was at remembering everything about all of his guests. So, I'd see Terry in February and tell him, I'm going to this bartending competition in Vegas in April. And then the next time I'd walk in there, it'd be July, and he'd be like, hey, Chris, how did that comp go? How'd you do? And it was like, how do you possibly remember that? And so, that's what the level of hospitality that I think old school bartenders learned, that nowadays it's kind of, again, it's not a matter of people not wanting to do those things. It's not a matter of people, like, I'm not trying to say like today's bartenders are either self-centered or egotistical. I'm not saying that. What I'm just saying is there's a lack of focus on that stuff and more of a focus on, let me tell you the story about this spirit that my rep taught me about, things like that. It's just a different focus on things now. And I see it when I judge world class too. The bartenders will tell me a whole story about the cocktail, but I don't know anything about them, or I don't know anything about the if we say, okay, tell me a story about this, and then it's 10 minutes about something else. And I'm like, but the whole point of this was to tell me a story about this particular thing instead of what you told me about. So again, it's just a matter of understanding what to talk about and what to focus on behind the bar. And again, I think it's just something that we could all do a better job on it and learn how to do better, especially after we all reopen and life gets back to normal.
That will exactly be it. I've been waiting for a long time for Flair and mixology to try to come back together again. because when Flair fell out in the, I guess around 2008, 2009, when all the funding dropped out, um, and then mixology really took over, there's this real divide between Flair bartenders and mixologists, and I've been waiting for it to come back together again. And I don't know whether it's the book learned mixologists or the Instagram guys or however any of that plays into it. But I'm hoping that all of that comes together when this COVID breaks and people just get back to the bar again. And they're not mixologists, they're not Flair bartenders, they're just happy to be bartending at that point.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple thoughts when you were talking I had. One of them is I think one of the biggest parts that kind of, let's say drove a stake through the heart of Flair bartending was that other than a couple comps, there was no attention paid to what was in that glass at all. And I can't imagine how any of those brands were very excited about what was being put on the bar. You know, they loved watching these bartenders make these drinks, and I'm sure it was super exciting. But at the end of the day, how do you show a return on investment on that? You know, hey, look at those great guys who just flipped the bottles around in a club in Florida for a couple days. Like, what do you do with that? You know, and with the mixology thing, every part of that is now marketable. Every part of that is sellable. You know, you can take that cocktail and run it globally, and you can't do that with Flair. So the problem was that Flair never, ever caught up, never thought about what was in the glass. Like I said, there was a few comps that had mixology aspects like the Blue Blazer, but nothing standing, you know, nothing that was going to really get Flair and keep it in a hold, you know, and I think that was a big part of it. I think the other part was that with mixology coming around at the beginning, there was such a strong focus on being serious about it. I had a long conversation with Julie about this when she was training at bartend in the mixology world and at her bar. We had a long talk about it. I think it actually was on the interview. And, you know, she was saying that when she and Audrey Saunders and Gail DeGroff and, you know, the rest of the girls who really got it going in New York, they said that they purposefully pushed this very like serious attitude because they were trying to make people respect what they were doing. Because, I mean, I know you remember this. If I picked up a jigger in 2000 or 2001 and started pouring a drink in it, my guests would be mad at me. They'd be like, what are you doing? What are you cheat? You're trying to be cheap. You're trying to screw me over on that kind of stuff.
Me?
Yeah, that was just the attitude back then. And so they had to put this sort of like, you know, like this is serious, this is what we're doing attitude, because that was the only way to get for people to take it seriously. And I totally respect it when
so focused on the pour going into the jigger, right? So focused on making sure they had the measurement just right, you know, the scientific method behind it all.
Exactly.
And where we put our focus with our eyes, everyone focuses on, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I applaud them for doing that and having the foresight to do that.
Yeah.
I call it the pendulum, you know, where the Flair guys started out as Flair bartenders, started juggling, and they took Flair way beyond any kind of logical, practical application behind the bar. You know, and like you said, they're not even making drinks that taste very good. It's just all show and fun.
Right.
And then the mixologists were too serious. They were unapproachable, and like you said, they're so dry when you sit down at their bar. And I'm kind of hoping that as we get into this kind of new generation of bartenders, that we can have that a blend of the two, you know?
Yeah. And I think that will happen.
Or Chris Cardone.
You know, I think about the aspect of, like you just said, they were so stiff. You know, I always think of telephone, and I think that a lot of times when people train somebody, there's a misstep there in the telephone game, right? And so the people who open the bar have a vision and they want to do a certain way. And then they train their first group of people and they do it very close to the same. But there may be a little bit of change, a little bit of difference, right? Maybe they're excited that they're working under the owner. So maybe they're a little bit more arrogant than the owners are, who are a little bit more humble, who understand this is my place. And then at the same time, you have the next group who are, again, telephoning this kind of service-driven training. And now the third group is so overcompensating for the second group's training that they got from it, sort of a little bit more of an arrogant aspect, that the third group is now really buttoned up with their nose in the air, and they want nothing but, you know, praise and accolades and adulation. And then you have the fourth group, and it just continues on this kind of vicious cycle of sort of losing what bartending is really about, and that's really about making people happy. I mean, so to answer your question in a very, very long-winded way, I think that when this is over, you know, people are already talking about how 2022 is going to be known as the Roaring 22s because of, we won't really, I mean, you know, knock on wood, it's tomorrow, but we won't really get back to normal for a while still. So when in 2022, I mean, the amount of travel, the amount of partying, the amount of, I mean, everything that's going to be happening that year, whether it's January 1st or September of 2022, it's just going to be so much release that I think people are going to be at the bar for a very different reason. I think they're going to be at the bar to have fun. And I think Flair is the aspect of fun, but who wants to drink a crappy drink? So it has to meet in the middle. I think of bartenders like Christian Delpeche, who has leaned into that mixology world now. And I'm so excited that he has, because, you know, for me, and the time that I got into Flair, Christian was the guy. You know, it was, I watched Rodrigo, and I watched Danilo, and I watched some of the other guys really step into his shoes and really kind of push Flair further. But Christian was always the guy for me. He was like the Michael Jordan for me, where LeBron might be better, but still people were like, nope, Jordan. That's for me. That was how I feel about Christian, where I was like, he was the man, you know.
His charisma on stage, his charisma on stage, and his smoothest emotion, and he was kind of the first one. Even if you go back to Alan Mason and Kenny Hall, they didn't have the panache that Delpeche brings, or Christian Delpeche brings to the stage. So I thoroughly agree with you on that. And he's leaned into mixology. I just saw him on Instagram the other day doing some pour testing and speed pour and something. My question to you is, I'm a mixologist. I don't do any Flair, but I'm kind of interested in it, and I have the foresight that you just explained about the Roaring 22s.
Mm-hmm.
How do I get into Flair? Where do I start? How do I start bringing other aspects into my bar world?
I think, and this is a really interesting kind of thing for me to talk about, because I personally experienced this, where I won world class right in the US, and I had to go to the globals, and I wanted to do some Flair in the globals, but I was really worried about how it would be perceived, because the last thing I want to do when I'm competing is make the judges think that I think I like some hot shot. Right? That's not the perception I feel like I ever want to give a judge who's watching me. I want to always come off that I know what I'm doing, and maybe I'm very good at it, but I still am humble in that I'm not like some hot shot Flair guy trying to show off. That's not the kind of the thing you want to give a judge in the back of their head judging you on a mixology comp. Right. So I taken a flight down to Miami, and I trained with Julio Cabrera, who, you know, owns a really great Cuban bar in Little Havana, Miami, La Trova. And so I sat with Julio for a couple hours, and we worked on what I consider what you'd call like mixology Flair. And I remember you, myself, I think Mike McLean was with us, and we were talking to Gary Regan one time about this, and we were talking about how the way you stir is Flair. The way you strain a cocktail is Flair. 100%. It's not 6-bottle exhibition Las Vegas Flair, right? But it doesn't have to be. It's all Flair. The term Flair is just doing something with style, right? With pizzazz, with panache, whatever you want to call it.
I think every great mixologist has some kind of Flair. It's a dexterity, it's a celerity of motion, and just, you know, the tools so well that you spin it because it's more efficient to spin it at some point. You know, Tobin Ellis talked about this at the very beginning when we were first starting the Flair Bartenders Association. He was always saying that Flair isn't about the juggling and all the big stuff. It's faster for me to get this over here by going here, so I can still grab this, and by the time I'm over here, I've got everything going.
Exactly. So yeah, so some of the things Julio and I worked on was, for example, how to strain a cocktail. And one of my favorite things watching him compete is how clean he is with all his movements.
Right.
And so, as silly as it was, to take a mixing glass, and when I was going to strain it, he taught me how to make a nice serviette, and I had the serviette here. I'm sure there's some water in here at this point. So I'm straining it with the serviette down here, and this stuff coming out. He just, with the serviette to clean it up on the cut. And wow. So instead of that whole free pour thing that all the Flair bartenders do, where it's just that, now you have a serviette in there too, and it's just cleaner. It's just a more kind of like, let's say, sophisticated way of doing it.
Right.
Little things like that, how to put the garnish in the glass. Using a knife to kind of pull the ice to the side and slipping it down at that 2:00 mark, for the guest. We're just trying to think of other things. I remember we were stirring, and I had always out of habit taken the bar spoon out of the mixing glass. He's like, what are you doing? Like, I don't remember if he said it, but I've always thought it since is like, what am I in a band? Like, am I in the drummer? And so, it was always about
tapping it.
It was always about, now it's about stirring it and just taking it out real clean and making sure there's nothing on there without any noise and dropping it down. There's all those little things. And I think that's the starting point. I think it's learning how to manipulate the tools. Again, it's about cutting. It's about using your jigger. People that are been bartending for years, or people who are competing in world class, and I see them still holding their jigger so awkwardly. There's no finesse to it. So learning how to use your jiggers and how to really twist them and turn them when you're using them, and making sure it's clean when you pour it over and it's not dripping and it's not hitting anything and it's not spilling on the bar. All of those things, I think, are where it starts. I really do. And I think about our good friend Graham Kimura, who's in Japan right now working at a bar, and I see him on Instagram doing all these kind of little things. I mean, I think that's it. I think that aspect is something that's so exciting to watch. And right now, Graham's like, oh my God, Chris Cardone said my name. No, I think that's for when I watch him, I'm so impressed by what they're doing over there. It's the perfect, at Jeremiah, it's the perfect balance of mixology and flair. Now, granted, it's all on Instagram. Is it real? Who knows?
Right. That's the strangest thing.
But what they're doing, if they can do that in front of a live audience every night, that's the thing. I love going to Carnival Court, and Tim Flippy Morris is one of my favorite bartenders in the world to watch.
Yeah, 100%.
That's not a business model that you can follow in a busy city that depends on paying crazy amounts of rent. You can't just sit there and flip bottles and flip bottles and flip bottles.
Right.
But
it's the only successful Flair bar in the world.
Right, and for a reason, right? And so you try to think of how you can do this in a business way, where maybe it's one little thing or it's another little thing, right? And I know we all do stuff behind our back without thinking about it, but that was always my one go-to when I would work every night, was if I have to reach on my back bar, there is absolutely no way I'm not dropping it behind my back, right? So now I'm grabbing that bottle behind me and I'm dropping it here instead of just taking it and pouring it. I didn't even think about it anymore. I just do it every time I reach for it, and every single time I pour, I cut it, these are just things that you do every night, and people are just amazed by it. They see it and it's different from what they see every other night they go to a bar. And so that's the Flair aspect of where you can combine the two. And then again, I think for mixology, it doesn't have to be so serious anymore. Mixology is globally accepted now. So now it can be about, let's have fun with cocktails. And you see bars doing that all over the world too, where it's more of a kind of like just chilled out version of a cocktail bar now. And I think that's a big part of it too. I think the styles will slowly merge and we'll find a happy medium. I do.
Yeah. What's next for Chris Cardone? What's the next decade of bartending for Chris Cardone?
I don't know. I right now, I've taken a lot of time to really do a lot of self-inspection. So, getting sober is obviously a big step in anyone's life who clearly feels like they have a problem and something they need to stop doing. And so for the past 5.5, I'm on 5.5 years now. I've really been focusing on trying to be happy and trying to find balance in life and trying to really understand what I want in my life and really focusing on attaining that. And so not doing what I always expect everyone else thinks I'm supposed to do. You know, there's a tremendous pressure now that I see in the bar world that I didn't see when I first started, which was, hey, you know, you can't be a bartender forever. You need to be a brand rep. You need to work for this liquor company or that liquor company. Or what are you doing? You need to open up your own bar, or you need to be the, you know, the general manager. And there's all these expectations that are put on people. And I think people put on themselves instead of just doing what makes them happy. And so I don't know if I'll ever open up a bar. I think it'd be a fun, something that would make me happy. I think I would enjoy it, but I don't know. And maybe I want to work for a brand, but I'll tell you right now, if I ever work for a brand, I'm going to work for a brand I believe in, not one that I'll post on social media as the best, rum, vodka, gin, whatever in the world. And then 5 weeks later, get a new job with a new brand and start doing the same speech for that one. And there's nothing that turns me off more than that kind of stuff. So for me right now, I work at a bar or restaurant in Manhattan that challenges me every night, that I still continue to learn at every night, that I love going to work every night, that I work with great people, have great guests, I have a great boss. I have no complaints. So for right now, I'm not looking for anything else. I'm not, pushing for anything else. I'm just enjoying the moment. And I'm just, again, I'm finding a peace and happiness. And, I think COVID putting me out of work for 3 months and giving me an opportunity to really just be home really re-energized me. I know the burnout ratio on bartending is insane, but for me at 19 plus years to be bartending and then all of a sudden go, you're out of work for 3 months. You don't get to do this. It really lit a fire back under me. And like I said, I go to work every night. I go to work right now. I'm so excited to be behind a bar or to be, I'm serving tables, I'm bartending, I'm doing the door, I'm doing everything right now. And I'm so happy doing it. Like it's always been a passion for me, but that fire is really relit again. So I don't know. Right now I'm happy just bartending. Just call me a bartender. I'm good.
Well, there it is. That looks like that's the last sip of your drink. Mine is gone as well. So that means, sir, that we have finished One Drink with Mr. Cardone. Any last comment, real quick comment out to future yous?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's always great to catch up with you. I've again, you have been a mentor to me too. And I remember sitting in on a class of yours that you were teaching.
Yes.
You were doing it for I don't even remember. We're talking 15 years ago.
Canadian Mist. I had been hired to do some consulting with Canadian Mist.
And I remember sitting in and learning things from you at that. And I remember going to Flair comps in the early 2000s and learning things from you then. And so I've always had that sort of mentor-mentee relationship with you. And it's first of all, it's an honor and a pleasure to be on here with you and just A, catch up with such a good person that you are, and B, to again, just kind of shoot the shit and get back and forth together and really, celebrate what it is we do. But I think that comes with what my last thing would be to say, which is it's about relationships, right? Whether it's the people you work with, the people you meet at a competition or a industry event, it's the customers that you deal with, it's the managers that you deal with, it's the people you work for. It's so all about relationships. Right. And when you can really create really good relationships that can last 20 plus years with somebody and still see them and be like, tell me what's going on. Like, that's the juice of bartending. There's very few other industries that allow us to do this kind of stuff, and you have to take that and run with it. I'm not the most social media savvy person. I don't tend to do a lot of posting. If it was my choice, I would be. But I feel like I need to kind of
need it for business.
But I think that for me, it's just about the relationships I've created over the years with so many Flair bartenders and cocktail bartenders and beer bartenders and things like that. And there's been so many great opportunities to travel and see things. And I remember right before I won World Class in 2017, I was in San Diego and I was on a beach. And Robin Clausen was my tour guide down in San Diego. Right. And she took a picture of me looking out into the Pacific Ocean for the first time. And I remember saying to myself, I would have never in a million years back in 2000 at that bartending school imagined this journey. Never in a million years would I have thought I would see the places that I have, meet the people I have, enjoyed the successes I have. So it's just about appreciating the relationships and the opportunities that this industry affords.
Watching. So thank you very much for helping us kick off season 2. And thanks for your time today. And thanks for this fabulous cocktail. I'm going to put it on a menu.
It's my pleasure. Go Saints! Woo!
Congratulations. You got a big win today.
Big win. Big win. It's all about voodoo, baby.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been One Drink with Chris Cardone.
Cheers.
Thanks, brother.